Okay, so we're going to take a real quick look at a looping array on the Duinokit. This is technically our second project if you're following in order. And obviously you're going to get a scrolling effect as shown over here on 8 of the LEDs. We did 8 for a reason because one of your challenges will be to add in 2 more. The wiring is pretty simple and straightforward if you look at the Tinkercode site, which shows a wiring diagram on there as shown. But what we want to point out here and learn about is the for function, or a looping command, which has an integer and how it initializes it, or what it starts at for the first integer, and what it's going to, the test condition. And this here, the x++, is the code for adding 1 each time it goes through the loop. If you do x minus minus, it will subtract 1 each time it goes through the loop. And what we want to look at in here is the coding process. So let me pull up my Arduino code here. And we put all the wiring instructions in here. This is one of my pet peeves that I'll try to put in most of the software as it goes through, is how can you wire it up, because you don't always have a picture nearby to go from, so you should understand what the wiring does. You can also start looking in the code to see where that appears, where it talks about the pin numbers for the LEDs, and these are the GPIO numbers on the ESP32, and also the number of elements in the array. There is a function you can use to calculate the number of elements, but that's a little bit beyond where we're at the moment, so right now we're going to hard code those values. And then of course you got your setup loop, which goes through, declares an integer I. I is a typical counter, and we're going to use I equal to 0 and less than the number of pins, which in this case it's 8. And you can see that when you scroll over it. The new Arduino sections have nice help. And then it's going to add 1 each time, and it's going to declare each mode as an output, and it's going to do this loop each time, declaring each of these 8 pins number I, first one, second one, third one in the element. By the way, the array starts with element 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so technically it starts at 0 and counts up to 7, which is why this is less than number of pins. It adds 1 each time and goes through the loop and declares those pins as outputs, which are telling you're going to send data out of it. And then we have the loop function. Now, I have a lot of stuff commented in here, so you can kind of look through that. I took out a little timer analog read. We're going to talk about that in a future section when we learn how to read data from a potentiometer and control the speed of the scrolling with a simple component added in. But we will talk about that later when we get to it. And this is Arduino code for A0. We're probably going to have to change that a little bit for a analog read pin, but we'll get to that in a future project. I also commented out several other lines which were used for different effects, and I want you to experiment with those a little bit. You can turn these on, you can turn them off. Basically this is turning pins off right after they're turned on. This is another display for turning them on in a reverse order, where it's turning them off and back on, and you can experiment a little bit. This one here has a I minus minus, which is going to count down. So this was a countdown to turn them off, turn them on, turn them off. You could experiment with those a little bit in your code and see what it does. You might want to experiment with turning them high, turning them low, turning them low, turning them high. This one here, I guess it's both low. One of those should be a high, and I'll go change that in the code. Otherwise you're just turning them off in order and you won't notice any difference. But experiment a little bit with those, see if you can figure out exactly what the loops are doing. That's kind of the fun part of tweaking and experimenting and trying to figure out what's going on, and you'll be able to use these code snippets in your future programs. So with that, I will turn you loose on the tutorial, do a little bit of experimenting, and I'll correct this code on the Tinkercode site. And we'll move on to the next project coming right up.